Welcome to the I Now Pronounce You Divorced podcast, where we have three award-winning family law attorneys dive into intriguing topics like divorce, military divorce, custody and visitation, trust and estate planning, and all things family law. Join us as we provide a comprehensive viewpoint through the eyes of our experts and guests, aiming to educate and soothe our listeners. Get ready to tune in because I Now Pronounce You Divorced starts right now.
Hi, I'm Charles Hatley with Melone Hatley PC, and this is our podcast, I Now Pronounce You Divorce, where each week we come together and we talk about topics that are interesting to us, things that may be coming up in your life or things that we see coming up in our clients' lives. Today I'm joined by Rebecca Melone and Mr. Dan Cuneo, and we want to talk about something that is here, summertime. So if you're going through divorce or you've recently gone through divorce and you have children and you've got a custody and visitation schedule, or maybe you don't have a custody and visitation schedule in place yet, the summertime can often be difficult because the children's time is no longer monopolized by school or other daycare activities or other sorts of activities. And you and the other parent are really forced into a situation to either you have to really, really co-parent or you have to be prepared to really, really fight. So I wanted to ask you, Rebecca, the first one I want to talk about is, let's imagine a scenario where the parties are thinking about divorce. Maybe they've separated. They don't have anything written down yet. And summer is quickly approaching. What do you advise clients to do and how do they best handle it?
Try to put together a schedule the sooner you can, and the sooner you can put it in writing, the better it's going to be. So if you always go on a trip to the beach during a certain time frame, if you always go to visit grandparents during a certain time, you have to start mapping those things out and planning for, okay, we have to be done with our vacations probably the week before school starts. So let's just basically put a big calendar on the wall and map the whole thing out. And then maybe we readdress what's going on once school starts back, but we're not in this awkward holding pattern or back and forth throughout the entire summer.
And, Dan, putting things in writing sounds great. It really does. What is your advice to clients who the other side refuses to put something in writing, but things really aren't going that bad?
Right. That's a good question. And a lot of times we have clients who come in and say, we're amicable. We're going to work through this. We don't really need to be litigious. I agree with Rebecca. And I just took a mental note for when I talk with clients. Mapping. I love how you said that because it makes sense. It's let's map out what the summer looks like, but let's do that ahead of time because we all know when you get into summer, it goes by so fast. And if there's any issues that arise, by the time you get into court, it may be too late. You might be able to get compensatory time, but if you want that summertime, you really need to plan in advance. And getting things in writing to what both of you are saying makes absolute sense because at the end of the day, if it's just talked about, then the other side may say, well, I didn't really necessarily agree to that. We're just having conversations. So at least you have something in writing. You can take it to a judge. You can maybe memorialize it into an agreement. But even more importantly, it memorializes what has been in the past. And going back to that mapping, this is what it looks like. And this is what we have historically done. And so just kind of figuring out, all right, if I'm going to go on vacation, here's when I want to go. Here's the number of days I'm thinking about. And then really trying to have that open dialogue with the other parent. Because at the end of the day, in my experience, judges really want to see both sides be able to co-parent together. And that you don't have to get along and be best friends, but as long as you're looking out for the best interests of the children or the child, that's going to go a long way at the court. And so if you're offering to put things in writing because it just makes things easier, but it also protects you. So absolutely, if the other side's refusing, then it's time to talk to an attorney and to take that next step.
Mm-hmm. And, on our other podcast, The Business Blueprint, we talked about strategic calendaring. And, we talked about strategic calendaring in terms of business, but for custody and visitation, what both of y'all are talking about is a little bit of strategic calendaring, right? You start when school's going to start back. You subtract a week to let the children get accustomed back to what their schedule is going to need to be. And then you start working together on a calendar with the other parent to break up the summer and be realistic about it, right? If mom always goes to the vacation with her parents from July 1st to July 7th, and dad always goes on vacation with his family somewhere on July 8th to July 14th, this would be pretty hard for the kids. Maybe the parents talk about it and say, well, is there any way we can cut this vacation to July 6th, or I'll start my vacation on July 9th, and put together that calendar. And, thinking about strategic calendaring in more than just business is always a good idea. Rebecca, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a weird question. What do you do during the summer if the other parent doesn't want to have any contact at all? They say, look, man, I got to work. I don't have time for this. I only get 2 weeks of vacation. I like to take my 2 weeks of vacation during the winter. Summer's all yours.
You can do that. I mean, there's a risk with anything that isn't somehow documented. There's a risk with anything that isn't somehow court ordered. Because what happens when he says, okay, I just want to take them for the weekend, and then refuses to bring them back? So you might go in expecting one thing, okay, I'm going to have them 90% of the summer, except for, a day or two here or there. But if I don't have any sort of proof, if I don't have any kind of court order to protect me, he can't then get in trouble for withholding them, right? If he just decides, never mind, I've lost my job, and so I'm just going to keep them for the rest of the summer. Who knows what can happen between here and there? And that's why it's so essential that either you have some sort of agreement in writing and then you submit it to the court, or you just go ahead and file something. Maybe you don't have a full agreement yet, but go ahead and get the court action started. And that way, if something comes up, you're able to take action a lot more quickly. That's what basically everything in family law is all about. We want to be able to keep the other person accountable, and we want to be able to react if and when there's a problem down the line. There's very little we can do, the day after when he says, oh, I'm just going to withhold them now. Okay, well, by the time we file and we wait and then we finally get in front of a judge, it's going to be 2 months later. And so you're very limited in what you can do to fix it or to get a better schedule going forward.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. The best time to file is yesterday. And for so many reasons, right? We always look at court filings as being litigious. But the way I like to explain it to people is you're putting equal restrictions on both parents. As much as we're asking to keep the other side honest in what they're doing, by filing, you are also promising to keep yourself honest. And so when we're going through these very emotional times, letting a neutral referee like the court come in and help control things kind of it may keep the emotions down. So Dan, we talked a little bit about filing. We talked about trying to put things in writing. We talked about, a little bit of a parent not wanting to see the children. Do you give your clients any advice on how to get around if the other side doesn't want to write a full order? Is there any way to get things in writing, not because it's enforceable, but because it might help you down the road in communication?
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure that it's in writing keeps, as Rebecca and you stated, accountable, but it also is kind of the rules of engagement. We know exactly what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and if there's any daycare involved, who's going to handle that. There's just so many things that are involved in summer besides just actual visitation time. And I always advise clients, it's important to keep things in writing because it keeps you on track, but it also allows you to, when you're mapping out, okay, we have daycare, who's going to watch the kids when, and is there maybe a way to save on daycare? If a parent is in a job where they're working 4 days out of the week, or they're in a career where they have the summers off, maybe they watch the kids because you can save them daycare costs, and then you pick them up at night. And then it just really, hopefully, will promote that co-parenting that the courts really want. But at the end of the day, if the other side isn't wanting to put anything in writing, I always talk to the client and question that, because then to me that says the other side isn't really wanting to negotiate or co-parent with you in good faith. Why do they not want to put something in writing? That's just, to me, it's one of the many red flags that we see in our field, that if someone doesn't want to put something in writing, there's something else going on. And then that to me is, okay, now we definitely have to get into court, because that's our only protection. And if you continue to let things go, it could backfire in the sense that if you don't have it in writing and you're not seeing your kids, then the court may say, well, this was important to you. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you file the motion to protect yourself? Because otherwise, from the court's view, they may say, listen, I see this as silence as acquiescence, in the sense, if you really cared about this, or if it meant something to you, you would have taken that next step. But the fact that you didn't, you kind of agreed with what the other side was doing, and you allowed it to happen. So we have to have something in writing. It protects everybody. And at the end of the day, it's in the best interest of the children too, because we want to make sure that they're seeing both parents. And most of the statutes, at least where I'm licensed, they want that frequent, meaningful contact. And what that really means is, let's spend the quality time together, and let's make sure that you are co-parenting, and it's not just making decisions, but it's going the back and forth and really being amenable to allowing each one of you to spend that quality time with the kids, especially during the summer, as you mentioned earlier, when they're out of school.
You said something that really hits home to me, and that silence is acquiescence. There's so many times that we've had clients come in and say, look, the other parent has been completely denying me visitation. I'm like, well, how long? 2 years. And, I almost fall out of my chair at that point. And they're like, I've been fighting for 2 years with the other parent. I've been sending, look, I've got text messages every single day asking to see them. I got text messages every single day asking to talk to them. And we go into court and the judge says, why didn't you file? If this was that important to you, why didn't you file? All the advice that we generally give people is, text, email when you have a request, especially if the other side's not being cooperative. Text, say, can I talk to the kids tonight? No. Or just ignoring the text. But if you let that go on I even say, if you let it go on for a month of not talking to your kids, you've waited too long in the court's eyes. And the reason is, like Rebecca said, if you come to me a month later and now I've got to file something, and the other parent's not letting you talk to the children, it's probably going to be at least weeks or even another month before I can get in the court. And now you haven't talked to your kids for maybe 2 months, or you haven't talked to your kids for a quarter of the year. And now you've got a judge sitting there saying, I have to do what's in the best interest of these children. And unfortunately, you don't have a relationship with your children anymore. What am I to do with that? So, you have to file. And Rebecca, my question for you is a little bit different in that, a lot of clients come and they want to retain us, but yet they still don't trust us because we're attorneys. Fair enough, right? Attorneys have a bad rap. Nobody trusts attorneys. And sometimes when we give clients the advice, like, look, man, you've got to file yesterday. We've got to file this. They don't trust you because they're like, well, you're just trying to run up my bill. How do you handle that?
It really comes down to, you hired me for a reason. This is hopefully maybe the first and only custody and visitation case that you're going to have to argue or deal with in your life. But for me, it's the 1,000th, right? And so there's a lot that comes from that experience, just like any other sort of professional advisor that you go to. Think about going to a tax professional and saying, well, I would rather just wait and fill out the forms myself. It doesn't make sense. There's a reason that you're in that office. There's a reason that you're seeking the advice. There's a reason that they're a professional, they have a license, and they know what they're talking about. And there's a lot to be said for being comfortable and, being able to open up and be candid with your attorney and trusting of them. And in that situation, if I have a client where they just won't trust me, they won't follow my advice, I end up having to terminate that relationship because maybe it's just a personality thing that we're not getting along, but it's really malpractice for me to sit here and not do my job. You've hired me to do a job. I need to be able to take the steps that I need to take in order to accomplish that job. And if I can't do that, then I have to release you as a client, and maybe another attorney would be a better fit for you. But 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell you to go file your case. You're not really going to go down the street and get any sort of different advice. But sometimes that's the harsh conversation you have to have with someone and say, look, I can either do my job or we can end our relationship. And that's the choice that it's yours. It's your case and you have to be happy with what's going on. But that's where that conversation has to end up.
Mm-hmm. And Dan, I'll ask you the same question. I mean, how do you get your clients to get over that stigma of what we are as attorneys and start trusting you as their advisor?
Yeah, that's tough because attorneys, unfortunately, have a bad reputation. And a lot of clients think that we're only saying we need a file so we can bill you for it and run up fees. But at the end of the day, as Rebecca said, it's really, we're looking out for your best interest. I like using examples as well. And I always try to explain to clients, when you go to a doctor, you're going there because you have a sickness or an ailment or you need help. You're coming to me for the same thing. And the doctor's going to prescribe you medicine, and that's going to hopefully cure it. The medicine on our side is filing. We want to file that. That doesn't mean that we have to be litigious or you're going to go to trial, but let's get something that can protect you. And then hopefully we can use that to facilitate some type of agreement or settlement. But without that filing or without that taking that medicine, you're not going to be cured and you're going to be in the same situation, and it's only going to get worse. Just if you go to the doctor like a common cold, if you don't do anything about it or just a sore throat, it's just going to get worse and worse. Here, as both of you have mentioned, failure to act is really going to be detrimental in the long run. And at the end of the day, I try to take a step back and try to hopefully paint the big picture of do this for your children or your child, because they need to spend the time with you. It's not fair to them that you're not able to see them, because at the end of the day, as time goes by, and we all know that time goes by so fast, you're missing out on just such precious time. And we might be able to do compensatory time, but what if you miss a birthday? What if you miss a big milestone? Think how that's going to affect the child or the children. And you want to let them know that how their father or their mother is acting is not right. And it's not that we're trying to take them to court and air dirty laundry. It's we're protecting ourselves and protecting what our rights are. And it is our right to see our kids. And it's hard. And I know I've been on that side to argue to the judge. Yeah, it's been a couple months or it's been a year, but they've tried, Judge. My client's really tried. And she or he said, yeah, that's okay. We'll try it again next week. Oh, we'll try it again next week. Well, at the end of the day, here we are months or years later, and it just doesn't make any sense. And the court really starts questioning why my client is wanting the time now. And it might be in good faith. Maybe they really have reached that limit, but it just becomes suspect and becomes just a lot harder. And so I really try to educate the clients on the benefits of what the court system is to be used for, and is really to protect you. And without filing, you have zero protection. And that can be a very scary situation.
It's absolutely right. I mean, I love telling clients the court is a prophylactic measure. It is there for your protection. It's also there for the other side's protection. You know, I want to be honest with my clients, say, look, when we file, you're also going to be controlled by the court system. Us filing is also going to open the door to the other side, if you act bad, to come file something against you. You know, for me, I like the medical analogy that you used, Dan. I always say, you know, if you had cancer and went to a doctor and the doctor said, look, I can cure your cancer today, or we continue to wait and you die, what would you do? Well, some people would choose the latter, but most people would say, look, if I can cure it today, well, it's easier and quicker, I'm going to do it. Like you said, Dan, it's the same way with law. You know, our cure is quickness. Our cure is speed and time. Time is always the cure. You know, I always laugh at what a comedy is. It's tragedy plus time. Well, don't make your tragedy a comedy by waiting so long. And when you're going through this process, trust. Only hire a law firm you trust. I was going to say trust your attorney point blank, but even, you know, we have to hire attorneys. I don't always trust the attorneys that we hire. And then I realize I'm at the wrong place. And so trust the attorneys that you hire. And like Rebecca said, if I'm talking to you and you don't believe the words that I'm telling you, please tell me. Like, man, I don't believe what you're saying. And I'll say, well, would it help if you talk to somebody else in our organization? I actually had a client one time. I said, go do a consult with another law firm and do me the respect of coming back. And I'm not going to charge you for the meeting when you come back and tell me what you think. The client did, and he came back and he's like, hey, you know what? They kind of said the same thing you did. Time is always the enemy. I want to thank both of you for talking to me a little bit about summer. We're going to continue this conversation next week. We're going to talk more about, you know, keeping up with summer dates and doing the right thing during summer, especially when the other side's not. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe. If you or anybody you know is going through divorce or custody visitation issues after divorce, you know, look on our website, get a lot of the materials that we offer. You know, we truly want to be your partner through this process. And as such, we want to make sure that you're the most educated person in the courtroom. So we enjoy talking to you today, and we look forward to talking to you next time.
Hi, this is Dan Cuneo with I Now Pronounce You Divorced. Thank you for taking time to listen to this week's podcast. Please join us next week for part 2.
Thank you for tuning in to our podcast. If you found this episode helpful and you want more informational content, please be sure to subscribe and join us on all major social media platforms, including YouTube. Stay connected for more exciting updates and tips.